we like to start any of our meetings, any of our circle time, any of our gatherings with a bit of prayer in our own way. We call it the good way. And so I'm going to be coming around with some of our traditional medicines, cedar, sage, tobacco, and sweetgrass. And it's to cleanse the environment, set our minds in a positive direction so that we come together and have good conversation this evening. What we have to share is significant. Tonight is a very significant milestone for us, and so we're glad that you're here and have decided to join us. And for everybody out in Zoom, we're glad you're here with us as well. So I'll go around and we'll do the smudge. So again, I just want to welcome everybody here face to face with us this evening. Your spirit and your presence here means a lot to us. And we'd also like to welcome our friends out on Zoom to this fifth community conversation for our Falls Initiative, for this Falls project. These opportunities, these events are opportunities for us as original inhabitants of this area and our broader relatives and allies to reconnect, to share our history, and to share and gain a deeper understanding of the many relationships to the river, to the falls, and together we will consider the future of this, what this place might be. And the series of these 5 conversations have put us together intentionally. And I don't mean so in an agenda or an engagement fashion. I am talking about spiritually. The river is a very, very significant part of our culture, of our being as Native people. It's played a huge role in the development of your people's city here. And so again, it's very, very important that we hear and we continue to have discussions and come together on ideas and visions, because you are our relatives. And we're going to have to continue to live in these spaces together. And the Friends of the Falls have provided an opportunity to give us that path for us to have these discussions. It's an honor. It's truly an honor. My name is Carrie Day Aspinwall, and I serve as a Native Partnership Council's facilitator for these discussions. Deep honor to work with the Native elders and the culture keepers of and within our Partnership Council, but also to work with you all throughout this process. Again, we smudge as part of our tradition and to start this conversation in a good way. Our prayers are being sent to our Creator through the smoke. We all connect to our higher power in our own way, but this is our way, and we are happy to share that with you all. These prayers honor all of our relatives. And I'm not just saying sister, brother, auntie, uncle. I mean everything. I mean the human relatives, the animals, the trees, the plants, everything that lives along the water, the swimmers, the fish, and the rights that they hold in our conversation and our decisions. Very important. We speak for those who cannot speak for themselves, and that's quite important. And again, I spoke with a spiritual advisor from my own tribe, and I asked him if he would come and do a pipe ceremony for us this evening. And he deferred us back to our Dakota medicine man, Arvel Lookinghorse. And he and Arvel actually opened up our first community conversation, our key event, down by the river. He was there as a support and again, we've maintained our connection and to our culture, to our spirituality, to our medicine people, to help guide us through this, and for us to be able to share with you all what our culture means to us, and again, as a pathway to provide an understanding of who we are, and that we've maintained our strength, that we can provide guidance throughout this process. And I personally want to thank the Dakota people that have been involved on Zoom, in person, on the NP, on our Native Partnership Council. Throughout this, they've led and helped us discuss what the right things are for this site. It may not seem much when you look at it and geographically look at it, but it means everything to us. We've not had access, and we haven't been able to have our ceremonies. We haven't been able to simply go down to the water and offer our tobacco. So we really appreciate that strength and guidance that our Native Partnership Council has given to us in this way. And to thank Friends of the Falls for allowing us, well, not allowing us, for sharing this journey with us and keeping an open mind and to understand our culture and to accept us for who we are. It's kind of hard to say, but I can't thank them enough for it's not often that we get invited to the table, let's say that. And we've been given front and center kind of carte blanche on all of this, and we truly appreciate that. To GGN, our architects, and David and his team for their vision. Part of that discussion with Brian today was GGN and their team. They don't just see with their eyes, they see with their heart and their spirit. And those photographs, these boards that you see, is truly documentation of what we've been talking about. They see it, and this is our vision. This is truly our vision. So again, thank you for joining us this evening. We've got lots to share. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Robert Lilligren. He's our president and CEO of the Native American Community Development Institute and partner in this initiative. Robert?
Miigwech Carey for introducing me. I'm Robert Lilligren. I am a citizen of the White Earth Ojibwe Nation, a member of the Muskie clan. And it's humbling, it's an honor to be here and to be participating in these community conversations. I want to thank everyone that's here joining us on Zoom. Unfortunately, the folks on Zoom can't smell the perfume and incense in the air of the medicines we just burned and smudged with. It smells beautiful in here. And I'm here to introduce the work of NACD, the partnership between Friends of the Falls, and the work of the Native Partnership Council. About 2 years ago, NACD and Friends of the Falls created a formal partnership. This came after about 6 months of conversations. And Mark Andrews, the head of Friends of the Falls, came to me and introduced me to the project and said that their leadership, and he wanted to really authentically center Native voices and put Native voices in the lead on this project, on this initiative. And my organization, NACD, is community development, asset-based community development organization. We are fundamentally a community engagement organization, systems change organization. And I'll just be really honest, Mark wasn't the first guy that came and asked us to do that, to help center Native voices. And so after 6 months of conversation, we were convinced they were authentic. They really wanted to do this. They were willing to punctuate, to stop the work that they had been doing to date and start it all over again in partnership and under our guidance. And so with Carrie, I really add my thanks to that. It's rare to see that happen. And we started engaging with local community, with Dakota tribal leadership, trying to figure out the best way to go forward. And we hit on this model of the Native Partnership Council. And we were really deliberate to call it a partnership council, not an advisory committee or something like that. Because as one of our local Dakota elders told us, why should we advise what happens on our own land? So this is a partnership, and it's been a partnership from the beginning. And we are trying to do something different than we've done before. And I really want to thank the Dakota elected leadership in the state, especially now Vice President Shelley Buck of Prairie Island. She has just been an incredible leader. She believes in this work. She participates fully in the Native Partnership Council. We have Native Partnership Council members here today. And as we discussed the project and recruited people to participate, a lot of the people we were recruiting have heard similar invitations as well. And the people that agreed to be here are entering in this work with such a spirit. It's amazing. And they really, really feel this is something different than has been done before. And these folks are across generations, across genders, and they are the creme de la creme of forward thinkers around water, around Dakota culture, language. Really, if you looked nationally, these are some of the leading people. And so we are very fortunate not just to have them here in our local ecosystem, but to have them participating in the Native Partnership Council. So we have now convened 10 Native Partnership Council meetings. This is our 5th broader community conversation. One of the roles that NACD has played has been to ensure that the Native voices stay truly centered in this process. And so far, so good. And I've served in government for a while. I was very active in my community at the grassroots level. I have been part of hundreds or likely thousands, I think, of place-based planning efforts. I have never seen anything like this before in my life. And in a minute, you'll see sort of the latest iteration of some of the ideas and concepts that David will present. I saw these the first time earlier this week, and it was literally almost tears in my eyes. It's like, wow, this is really capturing what we've been hearing from the Native community, what we've been hearing from the broader community. And so I'm just so excited for you to participate. I'm so excited. This is the final in a series of community conversations, but it certainly isn't the end of the conversation. And so we will see what happens next. And so at this point, I'm really thrilled to introduce David. This is David Malda from GGN. He's the one that's been driving this work of translating all that's going on into these ideas and concepts. So miigwech for being here, and David.
Okay. Thank you, Robert, for that introduction. And it's truly been an honor for us to be a part of this process. It's like nothing we've ever been involved in before, and just incredibly meaningful to be able to participate. I'm going to share through, I don't know if this will work. Can I advance with this? Share through some slides today, some drawings, some themes, some concepts that we've been talking about. And I want to start here because we start every one of our conversations here, themes that have emerged through discussion. And we always want to put these forward to remind ourselves, what are the goals? What's the vision? What are we trying to achieve here? And again in different ways, we keep coming back to the idea that the Falls is a place of convergence. It's a place where things come together and connect. And rather than thinking about this project as a more traditional place-based project might, that we do engagement, we figure out what it needs to be, and then we build it, and then, who knows what comes next. We've always tried to keep ourselves in a mindset that this is a place to sustain a larger process of engagement, of ongoing connection building, relationship building, and learning, because that's the bigger goal. This is a small footprint, but it has a much bigger impact if we can approach it that way. And so these themes, the idea of restoring a story disrupted, that this is a powerful place, and power has meant many different things to different people here. Thank you. It's about building connections and building relationships, and really central to this all is the idea that water is life. So next slide, please. For orientation, I think most folks here are familiar where we're talking about, but it's always a good reminder to put this in the context of the larger river. The central connecting role that the river plays here and its power is much larger, again, than this one project. And so we always want to remind ourselves that we're working in something much bigger and much more powerful, and to remember all of those connections. Next slide. And then more immediately, this is the area that we're talking about, which is, if you flip to the next slide, you know, an overlay of jurisdictions. This is complex. There's lots of different boundaries. There's lots of different senses of ownership. And what we're trying to do here is to really expand beyond that. We're trying to think, and today what we'll be showing is, you know, not totally following every one of those lines, because of course those lines don't really define the bigger forces that are in this place, that we have to still work with that. Next. So the concept that we've continued to grow into is the idea that this is a process of weaving. We'll talk about water, we'll talk about land, we'll talk about program today and governance, and these transformations, which are really in a lot of ways about reconnecting. These things weren't so separated and turned into bureaucracies before. At one time, that was disrupted, and that is that story disrupted. But the fundamental truth and the bigger underlying land continuity of water is still there. And so what we're doing in this process is weaving those back together and rebuilding those connections. And they'll take different timescales. Some things can happen fast, some things will take years and years. But this, again, is a much bigger process and project. Next. So if we start with water, next. One of the fantastic drawings from one of the early Native Partnership meetings, the centrality of water. It's easy to come to a place like this and think, oh, there's a piece of land. What can we do in that land? The land is very full already. The water is even bigger and more central to the idea of this project. And so we're always trying to recenter our thinking about this place in relation to the water and the connections to the water. Next. One of the things that we've been thinking about in our discussions is that the qualities of water, the qualities of the water above the falls, in the falls, and below the falls was something very different and distinct before. Next. And so we've talked about this framework of working from the perspective of what the water would be, what the water wants to be. It doesn't mean we're saying we should restore every inch of everything just as it once was, but the life of the water, the quality and experience and connection of water can be foundational. And this series, the upper, the falls, the lower, has been a guiding principle and framework for us to think about what are the kinds of connections to water that happen above the falls, in the space of the falls, and below. Next. Of course, much of what is out there today was designed to control that water. And so there's a lot that's going on here to challenge that clarity of water and conflate that. I mean, that's what these structures did. And today, the water in many places isn't healthy because it's not moving, it's stuck, it's trapped, it's not flowing. Next. So at a very fundamental level, one of the biggest things that we've heard through this process is let the water flow. Move the water through, let the water connect again as a core idea. Next. And what we'll see later is a proposal that says there's, you know, hope and chance that we actually could draw water back through and presence it in this place. Next. And connect it back into that channel below, which sits as a dead pool today. And if we think about the framing within the context of the site, the qualities of water, connections to the water, experiences of the water could be really distinct. And build on that framework and understanding to build those different relationships back into this place. Next. And the kind of program, we'll talk about program today, and Interborough is going to share some thoughts in the conversation after about how do we think about programming. We really want to emphasize what we've learned through this process is programming is not recreation alone here. Program is the water itself, its connections to the water, ceremony, healing, transformation, that can go on in many steps and in many ways, but it's so fundamental to the idea of this place, in the teaching and the knowledge building and the language. It's all connected together, and there's great opportunities here for that. Next.
You're just being crazy.
The land.
Practically. Look at
Next. forward. There we go. The land is confused today, and that's not surprising because it's been so completely transformed. What we know as shore or islands or upland and lowland are all kind of mashed together through that industrialization of this place and the desecration of the falls, quite honestly. Next. The topography, though, that relationship between upper and lower is still present, of course. And it's important as we look through drawings to think it's almost 60 feet between where you come off the end of the Stone Arches Bridge, that moment there, and where you come down to touch the water. So there's a really big change in level. Next. And of course, if you've looked across here, you can see that change, but you certainly can't get there. And so that's a big part of what we've been talking about. Next. And the quality of the land, it's pretty sterile. Next. So building on that framework, again, thinking about what's the kind of plants, what's the kind of relationship between land and water in the upper and in the lower? Can we exaggerate that and amplify that or bring that back again here? Next. And within this focus area, of course, all of these need to connect and should connect up the river and downriver. But we've imagined and talked about the potential to bring more of that diversity of native planting in. And those plants are teachers, those plants are opportunities for learning and cultural practices, not just sort of hands-off ecology, but there's so much richness there. Bringing trees back in, bringing the scale and presence of those plants over time, as well as softening shorelines and creating greater biodiversity, supporting greater biodiversity. This section, which is, the lock is on the right side today and down to that channel by the mill race, the road, the gravel embankment that's there. Next. We've talked about the ability to start to shape that land again and soften that to bring some early planting in. Next. And with time, potentially softening that shoreline further. Again, that's a step beyond this immediate boundary of the site, but thinking about what's that bigger land connection and growth and potential, and maybe that road can come out someday. Next. And again, thinking about program and planting connections through, participating through. We don't imagine you say there's a forest and suddenly there's a forest, but you embrace that takes time and seeds are planted and certain species grow quickly and soil can be built. And that's, an activity and something that people can do here and participate in and learn from here. And that can grow with time. Programs, connections, and relationships. Next. Key things, and we'll talk about this more as this project progresses. Water is life, arts and culture, knowledge sharing, ceremony, indigenous food systems. This is just a beginning of lists, but again, really thinking more broadly about what it means as a program. What are the activities and opportunities that are connected to the land, connected to the water, connected to cultural practices that could be unique to this place? Next. Of course, there's surrounding many known public spaces, and we want to think about this in relation to those. Next. As well as key connections, links. There's a great convergence and gravity of that moment, and there's power in that connection and orientation. So that's an important spot. Next. So one of the key moments, and this isn't even technically within this project boundary, it's more the Waterworks Phase 2 world, but this all has to work together, that convergence that's up high. Next. And today it's not very clear what is there. It's sort of, some trash cans and paths that come together-ish. So lots of opportunity for improvement and strengthening that. Next. And then, of course, as I noted, you can't actually get down there from up there without taking that switchback ramp. Next. The other key focus area that we've talked a lot about, Spirit Island and the connection to touch the water, the shore, that lower relationship to the river. Next. And you can see it's there. I mean, you walk out there, you pass under the bridge, and you're in that space of the river. Next. So one of the most fundamental ideas that we've brought as a priority and talked about extensively is just simply being able to make that connection accessibly and for all ages, to be able to come from where everyone comes together and get to the water, a very fundamental idea. And how that can connect to the water too. And then, opportunities for gathering in multiple places, multiple additional links within that, which I'll now quickly walk through. Next. Which has led us to this concept plan. And this is, I really want to highlight, this is a framework. This is an idea of movement, of how could you find accessible routes through, where do you find potentials for spaces, moments, views, orientations, that show respect to things like Spirit Island, and really try to make this relatively small spot in the city feel bigger and feel more connected. Next. This moment of convergence that I've highlighted before, again, outside of this project, but incredibly important to orient and draw people together. Next. Just taking down these fences would be fantastic, and finding a way to access into this space. Next. This next point of convergence, if we start to slope down, draw that water through, find that moment of connection at the level of the lock to see the water, to move on top of the lock, or to continue down into the space. Potentially an opportunity for some kind of structure. I mean, there's lots of potentials that we are now just getting into as we talk about programming. Next. Moving into what we've called the gathering circle, that connection off of Portland could be a great place for a smaller event that has access to the road. It doesn't feel like it's dominated by cars moving through or anything like that. And it has orientation to what we've suggested where the water could continue through. Next. You can see that view from Portland today. That is a way in. Next. And looking across the site from the bridge, you can see that space, which that restroom building we believe can go out. You know, some of that can be removed to open this up more. Next. And a sketch from that same view, essentially showing how you might start to weave that connection down, draw that water through, bring planting in, and frame, you know, a tiered space with a place for gathering. Next. And as a point of reference, some important comparisons from Franklin, you know, seeing the gathering space at the American Indian Center, that amphitheater there, just as a, you know, kind of scale that we're talking about. Next. Moving further through, as you pass under the bridge, again, a lot of that gravel embankment can go away most likely. We can bring more planting in and feel like you're immersing into that as you pass under the bridge. Smaller opportunities for teaching language along the way, as well as restoration planting. Next. You can see what that view looks like today, which is obviously very dominated by that gravel embankment. Next. And you can see with that moved away, with, you know, refinement of the circulation, the paths down, you actually start to get views to the river. Imagine planting coming in to help layer and frame against that. Next. And then passing under the bridge. And for those who haven't been out there recently, just to walk down that road, that sidewalk from the parking lot to pass under the bridge and then suddenly open out to the river, it's incredibly powerful. So we think that that's something to build on. Next. And you can imagine, again, if that road can go away or be transformed, that connection down could be a really great invitation and place to, with reverence, gather at the river and orient to Spirit Island. Next. That relationship is really what's shaped a lot of that proposal of a path down, so that one orients to that river, to Spirit Island, and then comes to that place. We've suggested maybe topography or other strategies could be used to give some privacy and protection to that space because it is so important. Next. And the topic of Spirit Island, I think, has been discussed before in these community conversations, but incredibly important to remember the degree of destruction and desecration here. This is a very real truth of this place that we believe is incredibly important to hold on to and teach. And so that transformation needs to be remembered and treated with reverence, certainly, in its approach to the water. Next. And we've talked about, through the Partnership Council, you know, thinking about how to honor that presence, not rebuild it and access it. We've heard about the need to mark and make visible, make known, but not to necessarily try to get out to that spot, at least anytime soon. Really protecting the reverence and sacredness of that connection, and that you know, we really have to think about that in the dynamics of public space and invitation. It's an opportunity for teaching, gathering stories. And then we've discussed too how working with Native artists, Native-led initiative could be a great opportunity to mark that and presence it, whether it be through light or art installation, you know, who knows what that could look like, but to presence it and make it known for that remembering and truth. Next. The actual area along the shore there, again, that's a hope that that could be expanded slightly and softened slightly, but it's an amazing place for gathering, again, of a certain kind that's appropriate here. Next. And then we've also talked about the space of the lock itself and the potential to have a connection below to look back into that space. Next. And the lock today really sits as an obstruction that's very visible and present. And the goal, as we've discussed this, is to say, as you approach, to try to make it go away as much as possible. But perhaps there's power in holding on to its presence as you look back into those two concrete walls as a part of this truth of the place. Next. And talked about, again, those different experiences, being on top, approaching, and looking through. Next. And have had some great conversation. Again, these are always the beginnings of thinking, but holding on to that truth, the example of the Peace and Memorial for Peace and Justice, rather. This could be a powerful place for memory, for the truth telling of genocide, for, not wanting to gloss over that and sort of pacify all this, but there needs to be that power. There needs to be that truth here. And of course, we've seen even in the projection work, Andrea Carlson and others, that there's opportunities to keep telling and challenging that story. Next. So that leads us to the point where we are right now in terms of having gone through a lot of these discussions, having learned so much, and being so grateful for this process. Establishing a framework about connections, about opportunities, about relationships through time. To set up a vision, of course, this isn't now suddenly go build this all at once kind of thing. So next, what we're really starting to want to do now is to come back to those threads, to know that different threads can move forward at different pace. The work on programming, activation, that can happen soon, and build awareness, do more teaching right away. You don't have to build everything for that to start happening. The governance piece, Kirsty will talk to in just a moment a little bit more, but that is, a very complex process that moves forward, and the story of the land beginning to demolish some of those things or clear out some of those gravel embankments to begin to prepare soil in those first stages of planting in areas, tremendous opportunity. And then, to think about those connections of water, and not just the physical links, but the advocacy of water, the rights of water, those deeper initiatives that converge through this place. Always wanting to sustain that bigger vision, that bigger goal. Again, this is a place of converging a lot of things, about amplifying a lot of things, not just figuring out physically what happens here, but leveraging this to continue to do the bigger work. And with that, I'll pass it off to Kirsty from Friends of the Falls, who would talk a little bit about next steps in the process of the governance and relationships. Thank you.
Thanks, David, and thanks everyone for coming. Yeah, I just wanted to take a moment to just say how privileged we are to be experiencing a process so unique and different. And as someone who comes out of government and is really coping with the governance aspects of implementing this vision, I just want to remind everyone what Robert said at the beginning, that he's never experienced a project this way. I haven't either. And if this had gone in a typical way, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers would have done a disposition study of this place along with 2 other locks and dams. It would have gone through a GSA process. There was already 2 hydropower companies waiting in line, seeking amendments to licenses and wanting to set up and further industrialize the site. And that would have happened. If not for, I think, that early action to build coalition, to fight those interests, those commercial and industrial interests, to protect the site and to create space for a different kind of process. And so it is entirely unique. And we're, kind of building that ship as we sail it. And so this describes some of that early conceptualization, and really we're still on this path toward implementation. You see the mark of June 2022. This diagram describes the relationships between really government entities and Friends of the Falls as the contributor of early funds on the top. And so right now you can see the Friends of the Falls formed an MOU with the city of Minneapolis and the Minneapolis Parks and Recreation Board to really pursue another path of federal conveyance through legislation and to prevent that, that other thing from happening. And so that MOU was signed and that negotiation with the Corps of Engineers is underway, moving toward a memorandum of agreement describing the conveyance, and that will bring the land to us and allow for this other vision to start to be implemented. We're still a ways away from identifying what happens next. As you can see, you know, we've been engaged, and Robert described engaging with the Dakota Nations, obviously with NACD, with our Native Partnership Council. You know, what will that future be in terms of how the site is owned? The city has expressed its commitment to land back, but we have to wait and see if that becomes possible. On the bottom of this diagram is more the funding side of it. And so again, Friends of the Falls really underwrote that initial legal battle and legislative battle to open a different path for us. We did also start our public contribution. So we have a grant from the state of Minnesota that will fund some of the early improvements to the site. And those are being defined now through the Partnership Council process and GGN's work. Ahead of us is still a capital campaign. And you'll see the bottom line, which is kind of a typical way to approach a project. Revenues is grayed out. We don't know that we need to have revenues on this site. David described thinking about programming in another way. We've been really brainstorming, you know, what could that be? And so that's where we're at today. The site that we're working on is described in the parcel in the upper left. But as you can see, there's additional land along the riverfront also owned by the federal government. And that's a future opportunity. That entire shoreline, this lower lock, and indeed there's additional land down at the Ford Dam, Lock 1. And so Robert also spoke to this idea of the bigger picture. And I think, you know, in some ways this work came to us. I don't know if others have noticed, but all across the country and all across the world, Indigenous landscapes are rising up. Indigenous leadership is creating places. And here in our region, and I think David showed this map as well, you know, those projects are happening. So this project is not alone. The project doesn't end with that parcel boundary. It's part of something bigger that's happening. And I just wanted to show this as well. Again, the Indigenous landscape is still here. This was done some years ago and shows the original location of trails and settlements. And isn't it striking how those important places and those important paths are still relevant today? You know, Hennepin Avenue, that corridor going down to Fort Snelling, it used to be the connection from the falls to Bedote. And so it's still here. That landscape remains. And we are still here. And you are still here. And you are still here. It's incredible. So this, I'm only showing this because the city of Minneapolis, as we all know, has been through its own period of reckoning over the past few years, its own reckoning with truth and reconciliation. And these two slides are actually from that process. And I think in some ways, maybe because of this, certainly this helped. The mayor, sorry, I'm not able to advance the slide. The mayor made a strong commitment to this process, this very unusual and unique process. So here's Carrie, here's Mayor Fry at the key ceremony, which was the initial launch of the Native Partnership Council meeting, making a commitment to land back, making a commitment to Native voices in the lead on this site. And we certainly appreciate that. The city and the park board and Friends of the Falls have pursued legislation to direct this conveyance and also have pursued government to government consultation with the 4 Dakota Nations. And coming up is even more of that. We're not at the end of this story yet, but we're certainly well along. Interboro Partners is joining us now. So we're kind of coming to this point where we understand some of the design objectives for the site. And now, yeah, what is the life of the site ongoing? And so Interboro, I don't know if you want to rate, can you raise your hand? Interboro Partners is here. And they will be set up on this side of the room and GGN will be over here. And again, this is a little bit redundant with what David showed earlier, but these major themes which have emerged from the Native Partnership Council, those are the beginning of thinking about, well, what does programming mean on this site? So you can think about those themes with us. Sorry, I can't, oh yeah. So last slide, this is where we're at in the current arc of engagement. So we've moved through, as everyone said, a series of very large public meetings, 10 partnership council meetings. We're here at this alignment and programming stage, and we're moving toward completing concept design in late summer and fall. It's not the end of the story. There's more to come. So stay tuned on our website. And I think with that, I'm going to invite Carrie back up to guide the next events.
Thank you. We've done so much. This is a lot. I mean, and particularly, you know, as I stated earlier, it's a rarity. It's been a rarity to be invited to the center of the table. And I know that with each contact that I made to find support to in our water community, our Dakota community, and our urban community here, to seat our Native Partnership Council. And the people that we have with us are very significant, and with them, know, understand, live and breathe what, and their willingness to share the Indigenous worldview with all. It isn't just this tribe or that tribe that we're so very different. There is much more that we have in common than that separate us with our differences. And what we call that is an Indigenous worldview. And it's holistic in all of its parts. Our people see themselves as deeply connected to the river and to everything else that's around the river. And to understand oneself and what it's required to honor this space. So Amanda, that next slide, okay. Some more. Oh, some more. There we go. We can talk through this. And then again, as I had mentioned earlier, there we go. We speak for those who cannot speak for themselves. This is a very, like I said, a very deep spiritual journey for our people. And I do say our people. I'm, you know, of course, our Dakota people were our first residents, if you would, of this space. But across the river and down the river, we had many tribes whom had a very successful, what do you call it, partnership, the way that they did business with one another. You know, they had negotiations about who was going to hunt here, who was going to gather rice here. And again, always keeping in mind who is at the center, and that's those who cannot speak for themselves. They're represented in our circle through the clan system. Robert had mentioned that he's of the Muskie clan. Myself, I am Wabash, which is Martin, the Martin clan. And so again, those ones who cannot speak are represented through us and through our clan system. And so what we say to that is that's the rights of nature. We're also exercising through this journey true tribal sovereignty. Do we really want this land back? Is it workable for us? Does it benefit our people? That's a big question. Can we do this in collaboration? Because it isn't just about our people, it's about all of us. And so again, when we have these discussions, it isn't one-sided, inside or outside. It's very inclusive. And again, I really appreciate how we set up and how things are always in that same type of circle. And so again, it brings with the values and traditions of our people. We have a different set of values and traditions than the broader community. Our traditions and our cultures are never singular. They're always about everyone and not just one. They are focused on efficient lifestyles, never using more than what we need to. David had talked about reforestation and getting stuff going and getting all that back. That's right at our core. We have to bring our relatives back. They've been waiting for us. And I had shared with David also in an earlier conversation before we got started, she's been waiting to get unleashed. She has been held captive through the desecration and the recreation and the drive for the economy and all that happened to her has paralyzed her and controlled her, and she will no longer be held captive any longer, because we are here. We are here to help with our voices and to work together in all of this. So again, many of our, I would say many of our beliefs are tied to nature, to the animals, to the plants. And again, we start our meetings and our gatherings in a good way. That may be a little bit different for you all, but for us, it's our deepest connection to our Creator. We have the 4 medicines that are sent up to him, and he recognizes us and he understands what she needs, and we refer to the river as a female spirit. She very much is. And again, to have folks like you all and GGN and Interborough helping to unleash what has once been so closely tied together or chained, I want to say, fenced in. Those black wrought iron fences are the epitome of being fenced in. And that stuff I know for sure is going to go as long as I'm around. I really, really believe that. As a child, I was born and raised here in the Phillips neighborhood. And my dad would drive me downtown to go look at the Hubert H. Humphrey statue, #1, because he said, you're going to work in there one of those days, and to get down to the river. He arrived at the depot in 1944, coming home from World War II. And so he remembers the river as it was then. It wasn't very clean. There was a lot of industry going on. And again, being now urbanized, how do you and where do you find the opportunity to get down to practice our culture and to offer our tobacco and to speak to our Creator and to speak to our river? She's that important to us. And, as a child, all I can remember is these wrought iron bars like this. Dad, when will they let us through? When will they let us in? I got let in last week. That's a long time. I'm 63 years old. And our good friends down there at the National Park Service opened the gate and then opened the secret gate. And so I was totally in, and there was the water right there. And so again, it's been a while. And so this whole process has been, again, I can't say enough. I can't extend enough gratitude to my Native Partnership Council. You take so much time and energy away from what you do for our community already. These folks are pillars of our community. They preserve our language. They help make sure that we have opportunities for culture. They, provide pathways for our artists to show what their visions are. And so I just want to give a real shout out to our Native Partnership Council members. And I also need to do a shout out to Powell Grounds, Bob Rice and his famous fried bread and mojapi. I'm loving it. Yeah, and so again, we've got many partners that have made this journey a success so far, but as Kirsty was saying, there's much more that needs to happen. And we can't do that without all of you continue to give your voice, provide your input. I think programming is always fun about, what's the potential? What can we do here? Having the space as GGN has laid out for us as potential pathways and opening up those waterways. I feel super good about that. And again, to imagine and to come to some realization about the types of activities that will go on here, not just through funded stuff, but just as part of our natural way of life for us Indian people, for sure, to have that access. I see ceremony going on in those circles and going down to the river where potentially our youth could cast, a canoe in there or something, but there's ways that we can all benefit from these discussions. And so with that, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us this evening. We're going to break into two groups. On your left or on that wall there, we're going to talk with David and his team from GGN about framework, weaving, and just have some discussions about the process thus far. He's going to want to have you share some thoughts on these early opportunities. And then over here, we're going to also speak with and hear from Interborough, who is going to help us talk about what the possibilities are. And they want to hear from you on some of this. I mean, certainly, recreation is a part of it, but it's not just about recreation. It's our lives. It's our, people bike here, we have residents that live across the street. What does all of this, what are the opportunities? Owamni's right there. They're going to become our next best friend, as we're down there. Waterworks 2 is going to be getting started, as I understand. And so there's lots that are going down on this place. But quite honestly, I think the strongest point that I'd like to make is that the river is alive. It's a spirit. It lives. Certainly, we can try and dam her up and chain her down and put her behind fences and all that, but she's strong and she's going to come back and she's going to come through, and we'll all be better for it. All those projects that you see up and down the river are all efforts to unleash her. And that will happen in my time. I know that for sure.